fellow webheads, it's Jerry Rasco with you today, and we are going to be talking about the Amazing Spider-Man number 61 today. I'm laughing because unfortunately this is take number 2, so I had recorded the whole video and went to sit down and do the editing process and realized that for some reason it had not recorded any sound. So this is attempt number 2, but I got my Spider-Man gear on. I'm ready to go, and I hope you're excited too. So don't forget, if you're new to the channel, think about subscribing. That subscribe button, it's 100% free for you to click. It gets you... you can, of course, click the notifications as well, but it's an easy way for you to track all the new stuff coming out from the channel. And most importantly, if you like free art, subscribing to the channel is your way to get it. When we reach 1,000 subscribers, that's the goal for 2026, we will be giving away free artwork. So we have this amazing Spider-Man piece by yours truly and this Incredible Hulk piece. Both of these are free and will be going out to one lucky subscriber. No purchase necessary, not even shipping. I'll be shipping them for free. So all you have to do is be a subscriber when we reach the 1,000 mark, and you can be eligible to win free art. So hit that button, tell your friends about it, let them know as well if you're enjoying the content, and let's get us to that 1,000. So again, we're going to talk about Amazing Spider-Man 61. This is the conclusion, if you will, I think. Yeah, we'll call it a conclusion of the Brainwasher Kingpin storyline. So the Kingpin is trying to brainwash city officials and government officials to get them to do his bidding, to help him so that he can commit more crimes. And of course, Spidey, Gwen Stacy, and her dad are all swept up in the middle of this plot. So that being said, let's head over to the comic. Let's check it out and go through it together. So this is the cover to the Amazing Spider-Man number 61. It is very good. There's a lot of drama. Obviously, we have this big vat of chemicals, metal, whatever it is. Obviously is perilously falling towards Gwen and Captain Stacy, and Spidey is swooping in to save them. So the drama is great. You're going to want to pick up this comic and find out what's going on. In terms of the overall composition, it's good. It's very threatening. I'd like to see more of maybe a shadow on the figures below so that it's really clear that this is coming down on them, so much so it's blocking out the light above them. The other thing is maybe slightly larger. So if the figures were a little larger, it would feel like there's less time for Spidey to swing in and grab them. Like right now, it's so far that it doesn't really feel super threatening. Not in the way, obviously the amount of drama that you would like. The last thing that I would say that isn't my favorite about this cover is the background color. This yellow is very, very bold. It's very bright. And I think it kind of downplays all of the white on the page. And there's a lot. So there's sort of smoke, and there's all these action lines and things flying, from this big vat. Problem is, in this particular case, I don't have an answer. What would you put here? Well, you can't make the background red or blue because Spidey's red or blue, so you don't want him getting lost on it. You don't want to use a black background because you have this big vat that is black, so it would get lost in the background. You don't want to do green necessarily because Gwen Stacy's wearing green, so you're kind of lost, in what you can do. You could go maybe with a darker shade, a darker blue or a darker red or something to that effect. But I don't know. So maybe yellow is the answer. Maybe it's just a different tone of yellow. Maybe like more of an orange, heading into that direction might help the white pop a little better. Yellow and white are really tough in terms of the value of the color. White doesn't stand out nearly as much on yellow as it does on, obviously other colors. So, but that's the cover. Let's go ahead and take a peek inside. As always, this is a scanned PDF copy of the original comic, so we will see all of the ads, the paper the yellowing of the paper, the printing errors, the rips and tears, all the things that it looks like if you pick this actual comic up in your hands. This is from 1968. So we're talking about the time frame. And this is a actually really good splash page. Now, if you're a fan of the channel, you may be saying, wait a minute, Jerry, this splash page, you don't like the splash pages that aren't part of the story, but that's where this one tricks you. It is. So Peter, just a real quick recap. Captain Stacy has been brainwashed by the Kingpin, and he goes to steal, under the Kingpin's orders, he tries to steal police files, and Peter catches him in the act as Spidey and takes photos and then prints those photos in the Daily Bugle. So obviously, before then, even before that, there's a misunderstanding. Gwen is very angry at Peter. Now she's even more angry at Peter once she sees the pictures. Mary Jane has been sort of involved, tangentially, I guess is the right word, where she was working unknowingly for the Kingpin, taking photos, which was helping him to get people brainwashed. Aunt May, of course, is always there and struggling what would happen, if she ever found out Peter was Spider-Man, and Harry as well. So the Kingpin's thugs are looking for Peter because he took the pictures, and they're ready to rough up Peter some. So there's some crazy stuff going on, and this is all the subplots, and it's all tangled in a web. So that's really nice. So it's Peter musing while thinking, and all the visual representation of that. The only thing I would like to see a little different is I'd like thicker webs. So you have the web lines, and until you really go and look at it, it's sometimes a little hard to tell, like Aunt May's finger is caught and this web is sticking to her shoulder, or how is Mary Jane tangled? I'd like to see the webs maybe a little thicker so that you could really show the people being tangled in them. But again, that's one of those things where you have to be really careful. And remember, like I just said, we're talking about 1968 printing on newsprint, which is a very porous material. So if you try to put ink lines too close together, they'll just bleed together into just a mush. So drawing, delineated little webs could be hard with, 1968 printing. So just something to take into consideration. Real quick, we'll cover the continuing story, or the continuing art team or creative team. So Stan Lee is writing, John Romita is doing the layouts, Don Heck is doing your finished pencils, and then Mike Esposito is inking. So this team's been together for quite some time now. Still, I'm not as big a fan of the Don Heck finishes over John Romita. I think most people would tell you, especially other artists would tell you, that most artists are their own best inker. And so the idea of having John Romita do the work, finish it himself, I'd almost rather see Don Heck do his own layouts and pencils and have, a different inker come in, and just to see the variation. But here we're trying to get a Romita look without Romita doing all the work, because he's busy doing multiple books at the same time. But they're coming together and they're getting into their groove, so it's not too far off. Like I said, Peter is walking around musing about what's going to happen. He has kind of committed his heart to Gwen. He's decided, he's admitted to himself that he's in love with Gwen Stacy. He thought she was in love with him too. But now, because of all these misunderstandings and what's going on with their dad, she's extremely angry with Peter. So he's walking around musing what's going to happen next. And I like the shadows. So he's casting this shadow out ahead of himself, walking into a shadow. So it just reflects the dark mood of the character. I think that's some nice subtle storytelling there. So Captain Stacy and Gwen kind of come to heads, and she realizes something's wrong. She doesn't know what it is. Obviously, he's now a wanted man, but he can't say why, but that he has orders and he can't remember. And so, but he has to go hide. And so she's going to go hide with him. Now, I like this transition. So one of the things that John Romita does a lot, at least in these early books, we'll have to see if this continues through his career, but he likes to change a scene at the very end of a page, like at the last panel, last couple panels. I don't care for that. I want the scene to be switched on the page turn. But here's an example where it can work. There's just one problem with it, but this is a much better way of trying to pull that off. So what we've got here is Gwen and her dad are leaving their house, and then there's a phone ringing, obviously, and then we see Peter on the phone, and he's going, "What? They're not answering. Why not?" So obviously, what's happened is he's calling. This is the phone at the Stacy house, and he's trying to call them to try to explain what's going on, and realizes, oh no, maybe they're on the run. So he's got to go into action as Spidey and save them. So this is a good transition because it's not completely separate. You have the phone on one panel and then the phone with Peter in the other panel. So that's a transition that really makes sense to me. I like it. The only problem I have with it is if you look at both of these pages, at no point have we established a phone in the Gwen Stacy house. Now we assume that Gwen and her dad have a phone, but you don't see it, and that's the key. You have to visually see it. So what I would say is it'd be easy enough to maybe in one of these panels, especially up here on this page, so it makes sense, you have a side table. Maybe it's here in the foreground framing them walking out the door, or over, maybe we could have changed this panel composition a little bit and put the phone on this side table next to the chair where they're talking. So those are ways to establish there's a phone. You could also make the phone slightly different, either a slightly different color or a slightly different design. Obviously, there aren't as many phone designs probably at that time as there are, as you would see, but just changing the phone design so it doesn't look like the exact same phone in both panels would make a big difference into us understanding easily without the dialogue that, oh, this is Gwen Stacy's phone. Peter is calling it on another phone. So the Spidey picture is great. I love him leaping out of the window there. And a very simple background. I like it. Easy enough. The window is done very well. Good perspective there as it drifts back to the very simple cityscape. Again, remember, folks, sometimes if you're drawing comics, it doesn't have to be super complicated. Sometimes simple is better. And if you're talking about a relatively small panel, like in the previous page here, we see some buildings. We know Peter's in the city. It's not crazy, but it's just some rectangles, a few lines here and there. It doesn't have to be ultra detailed. We don't have to see every brick in every window. Sometimes just the shapes to keep your focus on the foreground is the way to go. And that does a very good job here. I also, really quick, I hadn't noticed it and it's not in my notes, but this little cast shadow on the wall is really nice too. So it gives you a sense of lighting and direction, and again, sense of space and depth that Peter is casting this shadow on the wall as he leaps out the building. So very, very nice there. So he's swinging in. This is a really cool swinging pose. It's very classic, and I don't know. I tried to do some research to see if I could find it, but when I first saw this panel, it immediately brought to mind a similar pose of Spidey swinging, but drawn by John Byrne. Now, John Byrne, to my knowledge, was not working at Marvel in 1968, so this is before his time. But it's just one of those where I don't know if it's the pose is very classic or something, but that's just where my mind went. It felt very John Byrne, maybe in the structure of the anatomy, or again, just the pose, I'm not sure, but I like it. However, there's a point to make here, and that is we haven't talked about this in any of the Spidey videos, and that is the underarm webs. So if you go back and you go through our playlist and you look at the Steve Ditko issues that he did, he included these webbing underarms, these webs under the arms of Spidey's costume. Sometimes they were really big. Sometimes they had sort of almost like a scallop to them. Sometimes they'd be just flat like this and sort of stretch out. Usually a little bit bigger, but prominent in every pose of Spidey. Once John Romita takes over, and I went all the way back to confirm this, he took over in issue number 39. So in issue number 39, we start to see immediately with John Romita the fade out of the web armpits. It just is very hit or miss. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not, and there's no real explanation. Nobody talks about it. But in this particular issue, it's here in one panel, gone in the next, and I think the web armpits only appear maybe twice. And that's pretty common. It's very much artist specific. Some artists kept it, some artists got rid of it. Um, in fact, in the artwork that I showed at the beginning, the giveaway, I did not include the web armpits. Sometimes I forget myself, so it's just one of those things that comes and goes. But I just wanted to point it out because we had not talked about it before. And you can see here, yeah, you can see his whole side, armpit, everything, no webs on either arm. But this is a really nice picture of him swinging in feet first, knocking the thugs to the ground here. The feet are much larger than the head because they're closer, so that's good foreshortening to take us back in depth and in space. So this is really, really nice. I like it a lot. This is a great page. And then here we have a couple pages of action with Spidey beating up these thugs who have come after Gwen and her dad. And I like the choreography here. What I mean is it all works, even all the way from back here. So Spidey is swinging in through the window. So that means his feet are going up. His momentum is carrying him up. And it does. And he flips right over to stick to the ceiling. Then leaning down, punches out the gun out of the guy's hands. Then drops to kick the two gentlemen with his feet, and then diving forward off of their shoulders to avoid a gunshot, swinging around with a leg sweep to knock the guy down, and then pushing with his arms back up to stick to the wall, grab these guys and smash them into the wall. All in all, the choreography makes sense, moves in an order that feels natural. I can get from point A to point B without ever going, wait, how did his arm get here? Why is it, how did he go from crouch to standing in the next panel? It all makes sense, and it's all drawn very well, very solid, good stuff. I really like the leg sweep pose a lot, where he's just on his fingertips and then pushes off to stick to the wall. Again, this is one of the things that I look for in an action sequence with Spider-Man, and that is Spider-Man acting like Spider-Man in a way only Spider-Man can. And that is agility, leaping, wall crawling, all that kind of stuff. So really, really good things there. I like it a lot. And then this figure, not so much, but that's not the point. But I do like the cracks in the wall. So Spidey has grabbed both of these guys and slammed their heads into the wall and cracked the wall with both of their heads. That I like a great deal. Just kind of shows that he's not playing around here. He webs up the gun for the last guy who turns and runs. Now, again, there's a couple things here. The little gun off in the panel here, just sort of hanging there as an afterthought. I think I'd almost say maybe it was added after somebody was like, oh, we should show the gun. Because it just feels like an afterthought. The other part is he webbed it around his hand. So why isn't the gun webbed to his hand? How is he able to disengage his hand from the webbed up gun? That doesn't make sense to me, but that's okay. Spidey nabs his leg to trip him up. But here's the thing. All of a sudden, this guy has gotten 300 years old. Like, let's go back half a second here, and you'll see. This is that same guy. So it's this guy in the dark with the dark hair, in the sort of grayish green whatever suit. Not the guy in the brown suit, not the guy with the green check suit, the other guy. So you see his face there. He's, he has some lines on it, but he's, middle-aged maybe, right? Makes sense. Same guy that he knocked down here. Like, we've seen this guy. Here's another picture of him. Yeah, he's got some wrinkles, but he's certainly not an old man by any stretch of the imagination. When he captures him down here and he tries to question him, but he's been brainwashed too. But this face is incredibly old. And it's how deep these wrinkles are, these frown lines, and then that there's multiples of them in amongst sunken cheeks, all the wrinkles around the eyes. Somehow this guy is aged 50 years in 2 minutes, which is weird. So that's not a great face there. It's a good angle. It's a very hard angle to draw, but he just being consistent. I know it's not a main character who cares? We'll never see him again. That's fine, but at least try to be consistent. Mary Jane shows up. This is one of those things I'm talking about where I do not care for this change. You have Spidey, frustrated that he can't get an answer out of this brainwashed thug. And then we cut to Mary Jane and Harry out on the street, randomly meeting each other, as everybody does in New York City. It's easy to find, walk down the street and find the people all the time. Okay. But Mary Jane is just a complete ditz. Like, things are going crazy. The guys trashed their apartment looking to, put the hurt on Peter. Gwen's Captain Stacy is a wanted man. Like, all this, there was just this big fight at the club Mary Jane was working at with Spidey involved, and nobody really believed her or had much to talk about. And now the place is closed, and she is just oblivious. She's just like, oh wow, that's bummer. So I'm not a big fan of this depiction of Mary Jane. She's not a well-rounded character. She is pretty, but she's definitely not the well-rounded character that we'd like to see. So it's easy to dismiss her at this point and see why why Peter is moving as a character towards a relationship with Gwen Stacy. She's a much more thought out character. Now here again, another switch. So you've got another scene switch of Mary Jane and Harry. Now he mentions his dad, and we cut to his dad. Going from that kind of transition, not great. And that's because it's a verbal to a visual. I want visual to visual continuity when I'm changing scene between panels. So this would be something where, like, maybe in the background there's so what's happening here is Norman Osborn's on the phone, but he's distracted by this story about a news, like a television news report they're doing about the Green Goblin, and it bothers him. Why don't we show that as a, in the background of Harry and Mary Jane? Or maybe Harry's got a newspaper and he's seeing the same thing. So visually, I want that thematic idea to go across the panels, and we don't have it there visually. So that's one of the things that I don't care for. Perfectly fine. Norman Osborn is running his business and finds out that one of his scientists authorized some stuff without his knowledge. And of course, it turns out it is this guy named Winkler, and he is the scientist that developed the brainwashing equipment for the Kingpin, and they are secretly using the lab at Oz. Well, I think it's called Oscorp Chemicals or Oscorp Laboratories, or Osborn as opposed to Oscorp. But it's Norman Osborn's company, and this guy is helping the Kingpin under his nose. So we see this is where they've set up shop. Another good depiction of the Kingpin being big, being menacing. I like here where when you can see that neck, how thick it is from the chin all the way back to the back of the neck. These are really good images of the Kingpin. That's a great depiction of him. Nowadays, it seems like they put this itty bitty head on this ridiculously 12-foot tall body that just doesn't make sense. Works okay in like a cartoon animation, but for comics, I get the idea that you want to go to the extreme, but to be a believable human being, you got to kind of come together. And so, Kingpin's calling everybody needs to be dead. Peter needs to be dead. Captain Stacy needs to be dead. Like everybody in Spider-Man, everybody needs to get dead. And to show how serious he is, he crushes a steel chair with his bare hands. Okay, seems like a dramatic display there, which doesn't do much, but no problem. I get it. And then the thugs head out. Now this again is a good visual transition. So we've got the Kingpin and his thugs in the lab, and they go to leave, and on their way out, so we see, here's the guys, blue coat, hat, brown coat, green hat. These are the same two dudes, the same two thugs, passing Harry as he is coming into the building to see his dad, which he mentioned before. That's a nice transition. because it's got that visual theme through it, of people passing each other so we can sort of hand off to the next scene. If you just cut from the Kingpin telling these guys, all right, you go, and then we don't have this transition, and then the next panel is just Harry at his dad's office going, hey dad, it's jarring. It doesn't flow. This is a good transition. This flows very well. Let's see here. The Norman is sort of vaguely remembering. He remembers a little bit about the night when Spidey defeats him as the Green Goblin, and his memory is lost. So everybody tells him, you helped Spidey defeat the Green Goblin, but he doesn't remember how. And as somebody, he's a smart guy. He's obviously a strong business person. He's a scientist. He does a lot of stuff. So for him to just settle on, well, I can't remember, but that's okay. He's digging in his brain, and as it says here, we hope he doesn't remember. But it's nice to set these little plot threads that we could pull, whether, so at some point maybe you don't want to, maybe you do, but when it's time, you decide it's, as Stan and the team, if you decide that it's time to return the Goblin, you pull that string and you've already set it up. So that's good storytelling. I also like the vague memory of just sort of the arm and the mask and the fire, but he doesn't really remember anything else. Speaking of masks, I like this down here. Peter is making, I guess it's a web mask, maybe. He mentions that the Kingpin has a gas in his tie pin that defeated him before, so he's going to make a little gas mask so he won't be caught unawares. So I like that idea. It's smart. I mean, it's something he should probably have under his mask all the time. And then just the way the mask is hanging here on this book or shelf or whatever it is, I like it. Just the idea that you forget sometimes it's this flat piece of cloth that he pulls over his head. It just feels very real. It feels like the weight of, like if you're hanging, a sock or a t-shirt or something. The way it hangs, I just felt was very real, very good. Spidey goes over to the Daily Bugle, see if they have any leads. He gets nothing, so he takes off. Kind of wasted time and effort on my part. Like, I don't understand why, we waste a page here. When in the end, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't move the story forward really, other than him going, well, I guess I'll have to try something else. I'll go back to that club. He should have just gone there in the first place. That was the last place I saw the Kingpin. Why don't I go there? So again, a little bit of a waste, other than maybe just reminding us like, hey, don't forget, we haven't really seen J. Jonah Jameson in a couple issues. So let's make sure everybody knows he still hates Spider-Man. Next, we cut to the thugs. They're tracking down Captain Stacy and Gwen at the airport. They are trying to take off. And I find it very interesting that in today's world, could you imagine trying to go incognito in like a trench coat and sunglasses through an airport today and expect that you're going to actually get on a plane and go somewhere? So I thought that was kind of funny. Obviously the thugs catch up to him and go, nope, you're going to come with us. So the thugs go away and take him back. Spidey shows up again. Nothing overly fancy here from an art perspective. There's good camera movement. I will say that through the whole issue, as you go through this, keep an eye on where the camera is placed in relation to the scene and how it moves from panel to panel. So I say this all the time for anybody who's new. When I say camera, what I mean is it's the relation of the reader's eyes to the position of the characters or images on the page. So you can't, in a film or television type scenario, I would have my actors, they're acting, and I move the camera around them to change the shot for dramatic effect. I can move it up and look down at them. I can move it down and look up at them. We can spin around, all that stuff. We do the same thing in comics. The difference is we just draw a different scene. So we draw it as a panel and assume the camera. So the first panel here, camera's kind of like on a tripod looking straight at them, at the actors. The next one, you cut to a camera that's way up high and it's looking down on them. Then we cut back to a camera where it's much closer. So we see their face and we get this close up here in panel 3. Same thing. Then we zoom out to see Spidey swinging up to the club. We've got a close-up of his face as he's noticing something. Then more of a mid shot as he pulls down this electrical panel and finds the Osborn Laboratories plaque on the back of it in a more close-up, so we see the detail. So moving that camera in and out and around with different angles is how you keep everything visually interesting. And I'll say this, so that's the strength. That's where John Romita's layouts really make all the difference, because he's the one picking all these angles. I did make a funny note of how much money does Osborn Laboratories pay for little plaques to apparently bolt or rivet to the inside of like a simple an electrical panel. Like appears to be on everything, so that's going to be expensive after a while. Here they're sent down to the lab. Nice stairs, good large panel for an establishing shot. This one I don't feel so bad about. One, we've set up the laboratory, so okay, now he's going to go check out the laboratory. Now we cut to the laboratory. It's also a much bigger panel, so it's not just one little tail at the end of the page. It's half the page. So that transition is not as jarring to me. I feel comfortable with that one. Something to note here, we'll have to backtrack a little to confirm, and I'll show you what I mean. But so they're all tied up. They're going to continue to re-brainwash Captain Stacy. Norman Osborn goes out to his car, looks and goes, oh, there's lights on in the lab. He's working late, but the sky is blue. Now there's some hatch marks here that might indicate maybe a dusk or something like that. But up till now, Spidey's swinging in the blue sky. He can't be that far away because he gets there relatively quickly. Blue sky here, blue sky here. And this is down, this is obviously indoors. There's no windows, so we have no idea. But it doesn't appear like there's a lot of time. Minutes later, they're captured. So if you want it to be night out, just establish that first. Like, it wouldn't be that hard as Spidey is swinging away here with the club. Now you indicate it's night. Put some stars in the sky. While he was investigating, the sun went down. Perfectly reasonable. So that kind of bothered me some. Oh yeah, here's the other thing. If he's saying it's night, he's not drawn like it's nighttime or that it's laid out. So what I mean by that is, look at the shadows on Norman Osborn here. So there's shadows on the front of his face, under his chin, heavy shadow under the arm. That's because how do you get heavy shadows? To have heavy, dark, strong shadow, you have to have a super strong light source. So there is a light source coming from behind him and above. That's what's casting the shadow on his face. So none of that light is hitting his face. It's hitting the back of his head, the back of his ears, the back of his shoulders. So your shadows are in the front. Great. So if there's a strong light source, where's the light coming from? Well, typically, if it's coming from up above, you typically would say that's the sun. But we're saying that it's working late and it's so dark that he can see lights on in the lab. Well, again, why don't we set up that night sky and then drop to a more, instead of a strong light illuminating most of the figure, you would do more of a ambient or rim lighting where maybe it's just the lights from the factory. So most of Norman would be in shadow, but because he's so unique, that hairstyle, things like that, you'd still be able to recognize him. So again, if you want to establish that it's night, there's a few things you need to do, and that's how I would do it. I like the swing of the Kingpin down here where he's getting that mass moving across. Like, that's a big swing, a big punch. That is the very definition of the Marvel way. So when you want to draw comics the Marvel way, you just don't draw a little itty bitty, jab. This guy's doing a whole cross. His whole body is into it. So that's a very good energy action pose. Up here, though, this I could not quite understand, and I don't understand where Spidey's breaking through. So he's jumping through some sort of window / skylight something, but it's not established in any of the photos of the lab. Or I say photos, drawings of the lab. So we come down here. It appears to be more underground. There's no windows in there. Kingpin's talking to the thugs and Winkler and all that. No windows there. When they capture the Stacys, no windows there, no windows. So where is this? And then this framework that's inside, maybe it's in going all different directions because the window's getting broken, but the perspective seems very off. Like one board is going sort of this way, then the other one is going back a different way, but they're both connected. It's almost a weird optical illusion. So the angle doesn't make sense and the spacing doesn't make sense of where this window is. Spidey's got to drop in somewhere, but this just isn't very clear. More action, which is great. We see the payoff of the gas from the tie pin, but it's not going to affect Spidey this time because he has a mask under his mask. And that surprises Kingpin enough for Spidey to finally just beat this guy to submission. He's been toying around with him like he's the Juggernaut when he's just a human being, and Spidey could literally just Mortal Kombat his head from his shoulders if he wanted to. So he finally decides he's going to beat him down and take him out, and it works. Now, let's talk about this arm and this fist. Not working for me. Now, I do like the turn. So Spidey is, again, throwing a big right cross. His hand is coming across. His whole body is twisted so that his chin is in his shoulder, right? So he's really coming around. But here's the problem. They want to do the large fist and the foreshortening of it coming at us, right? At the camera like this. But here's the problem. If you do that, then that covers up more of the arm and you have a true foreshortened area. Well, the arm, if you look from the bicep shoulder area, is more up and away from Spidey. There's not a great bend to the arm that would have it at a nice 90-degree angle to come at you. So realistically, it feels like to me it's just too short. This arm should be stretched out more, or the lower arm needs to be down and then the upper elbow coming across and up. So there's just something, the arm just comes out feeling stubby. The head is good. The twist, all that stuff is great. I like the little shadow under the base of the jawline there. I think that's really good. But the arm is just too stubby. And then Norman comes. Here's the commotion. And he plays the hero. He tackles Winkler, who the gun goes off and explodes, destroys the brainwashing machine, which kills Winkler and injures Norman Osborn a little bit, and allows in all the commotion, the Kingpin to potentially escape, which he does. Here's something to think about a little bit. It doesn't bother me that much. I've heard other people really talk about this where it bothers them a lot. Perspective is key. If you're not familiar with the rules of perspective as a comic book artist, it's something you definitely want to learn because it affects everything. We think of it, and I talk about it a lot with things like cityscapes or buildings where you want that perspective of those nice clean straight lines going back into space to your vanishing points, and that's a great way to show your depth and space. However, it affects everything. So what I mean by that is your figures. So if Norman is looking at Winkler and you do this with a perspective grid, either this guy's standing on a box or Norman Osborn is standing in a giant hole in the ground. There's no way he could be this close to us, this far away from the guy, just based on the amount of detail that we see, and be this close in height, right? So Winkler should be either way smaller, way taller, or Norman's head has to be a lot higher on the page because he's so much closer to us. But again, it's a relatively small panel. I can get away. I can move on, especially because all you see is his head and his hand. If you'd seen more of the figure and then you start to see him, you're like, wow, that guy looks like he's standing in a hole, or the other guy's standing on a box. So you want to make sure that as we go back into distance, things are shrinking in the right proportions to make the perspective work. So something to just take into consideration, and a big thing to practice as an artist. Here is the last depiction, I believe, in this issue of the web under the arm, and only one arm this time. So ironically, it's I don't know why, but there you go. Web under one arm. Spidey swoops down. We see the cover. So this is what I was talking about on the cover, where I would have liked to have seen that shadow, because it makes it feel like the object is closer. It's enough that it's blocking out the light, and so it becomes more of an imminent threat. But Spidey swoops in. Good smash. I mean, you could have slightly bigger figures here. It would feel, I think, if the figures were larger and maybe a little closer, and the debris, so it hits this ground, and I love it's a laboratory floor, so it's probably some form of like concrete, but somehow when this big vat hits it, it turns into rocks. Like it doesn't break like the material should, but that's okay. But if everything was a little bigger and the debris was kind of up closer to the characters, again, it would feel like maybe Spidey pulled them out at the last second, as opposed to he kind of swooped in and it didn't feel as threatening. Panels, again, all well drawn, but there's something here where the inks got really muddy in these last two panels, and I'm not 100% sure why. Sometimes it could just be the printing. Sometimes the black line might be printed twice, or something, but you can see when we zoom way in here on Spidey's hands, I'm going to zoom in, see if I can zoom in even further so you can see what I'm talking about. Oops, now I got to scroll around. Kind of cool. You can see the dots. You can see the dot pattern when we get this close, and how, so this blue has a little bit of not just cyan, probably there's a little magenta in there too, where this is more white and cyan. So it's kind of cool. But like you can see as you zoom in, you can actually see the lines. So the lines in the finger pattern of the webbing was drawn and colored in, but the ink is so heavy and blurry that, again, it sort of filled in those spots, and it becomes, again, very muddy. Like this eye was drawn, and again, the inks just sort of bled and really kind of muddied up the panel. So you see it a lot in Gwen's hair too. Like normally with her light blonde hair, you'd have line work that would show you the strands. Here, the line work just turns into big blobs of black ink. Again, don't know why. Could be a printing. I'm gonna chalk it up to a printing error more so than an inking error, only because it's not reflective of the rest of the page. And then the Kingpin does escape. Spidey goes after him, can't catch him in time. Everybody's going to attest to Captain Stacy's innocence, that he was brainwashed, and now that the machine is broken, his brainwashing is broken. And of course, Norman Osborn is there to be able to testify that it was the Kingpin and that he was under his control. So everything is good. Everybody's happy with Spider-Man again. But Peter has to wander off, sad, musing, holding his head in his hands, because it can't all be good. Does Gwen still hate Peter? And so he has to get into his, what's it say? He's got to get in his teacups and be sad about it and see what happens. So there we go. And that, again, as I said, is the end of this storyline with the Kingpin trying to brainwash folks. We're going to be moving on to a new storyline in the next issue. So that being said, let's cut over to the desk and let's wrap everything up. So that's The Amazing Spider-Man 61. Again, a good wrap up for a storyline where we saw the Kingpin come back pretty quick after his initial introduction. We see the resolution of Captain Stacy being brainwashed. We've seen Peter come to the conclusion that he is in love with Gwen Stacy. And so here to see how we patch up that scenario. So all in all, a good story, a good conclusion to the storyline. In terms of my rating system out of 10, I would give this a very strong 7 out of 10. There's some very good action with the thugs in there. The story moves quickly. It doesn't get bogged down with tons of talking heads. There's a lot of dialogue here, but it all moves the story forward for the most part, with the one exception of that little scene with J. Jonah Jameson. So overall, good writing, good action, pretty good art, and yeah, so again, 7 out of 10. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much for spending the time with me today to review this incredible Spider-Man issue. I look forward to continuing this, and as I've been talking about, if you're aware with social media or here again on YouTube, I put up a poll recently asking about other characters. I have similar comic records, these digitized comics for the X-Men, Captain America, the Avengers, and the Fantastic Four, and I'm curious to hear what you would want to see me cover next. So if you get a chance, check out that post, check out that poll, cast a vote, let me know what you think. And of course, as always, I'll see you here next week with even more Spider-Man.